Wait, so you started Gilmore Guys before you did UCB?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was the opposite.
No.
I was under the impression you met Kevin at UCB, your co-host Kevin Porter.
I did, but not performing.
Oh, funny.
And
just from going to all your shows.
Literally. So Kevin knew me on Twitter, and I went to a Doug Loves Movies episode where they like pull name tags from people in the audience.
Yeah, I love Doug.
Yeah, and he pulled my name tag, and Paul F. Tompkins said Electro Lemon, which is my Twitter name, because it was on my name tag or whatever. And Kevin wooed, and he was very much like, "Oh, this is a big Electro Lemon crowd," and I was like, "I don't know who that was or why they know me." But after the show, he was like, "Hey, I was the guy who wooed.
That's
I didn't want
hilarious.
you to be, like weirded out." And then we kept talking. And
that's so funny.
Yeah, and this was actually while I was still.
You had a fan.
I had a fan. And it was like, it wasn't a weird fan. It was just some guy. And I was like, this is cool. It's the same thing of like, if you're a PA and you meet a writer, it's like, it's just another person.
Right, yeah.
But this is all while I was still an intern at Red Hour.
While you were in school or UTLA.
Yeah. They had this thing called Crash Test, which was a Paul Scheer and Rob Hewell wanted to turn their UCB show into a live thing.
Right.
And Red Hour was producing it, and they needed audience members. So I was just like, oh, me and a friend of mine who's really into Rob Hewell and Paul Scheer would love to be in the audience for this. And Kevin was also in the audience for that. And
funny.
It was like an 8-hour bus ride. They just filmed one night, and we were all stuck on this bus for 8 hours, and we just kept talking.
I got a friend that was on that too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But they probably witnessed the birth of Gilmore Guys.
Oh, that's where it came.
Yeah, because we were just riffing. We were like, this is so cool. We really like each other. I think we get along. We have a good rhythm. And then at one point, he was just like, on Facebook, said, who would want to start a podcast with me called Gilmore Guys? And I just said yes, because I was like, I don't know what that's about, but why not? I love talking.
Oh, so you guys just had a rapport on the bus, and then he had this idea later, and you were like, yeah, let's do it.
This seems like a great thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What a beautiful coming together.
I know, right? Now it's done.
Yeah, and now it's done, but you do the bunheads, of course. Mm-hmm. And it became such a big deal. I mean, you guys crushed it. Did you see that coming? I mean,
no.
You probably not, but...
And there's a part of me that's like, if I'd seen it coming, what would I have done differently? Because I feel like...
Oh, funny. What would you have done differently?
I don't know. I feel like from the very beginning, I would have tried to be like, okay, how do we do this? Is it going to be more critical of... Like, is it going to be more of a critical thing, or is it just going to be more fucking around? And the fucking around was like what I loved about doing the show. So when we started accruing an audience, I just kind of felt like, oh, okay, I'm going to feel nervous about fucking around now, and I'm going to feel nervous about like sharing any opinion that's not like... effusive about Gilmore Girls. So it's just this weird thing of like, okay, I am doing a podcast and people like it, but I have to keep in mind that people like it because they like Gilmore Girls,
right? And
not to be like, like, oh, I only think Gilmore Girls is okay, because it's like that's not what we're listening for,
right.
So yeah,
well, it's one of those things where you're taking a built-in audience and you don't want to shit on that audience because you're taking their audience.
Yeah, and it's like, we don't want to shit on the audience, but we also don't want to lie and be like, everything about this is perfect.
Right.
Because I don't think that was ever the premise of the show.
Right.
So it was a lot of trying to navigate not shitting on anyone while also having the freedom to say everything.
Let's podcast and nerd out for a little bit, because I host a podcast. I've done a shit ton of episodes.
What's it called?
It's called Doug Loves Movies.
Hey,
I'm Doug Benson.
I've been on that before.
And you were great.
Thank you.
I love when you fawn over John Hamm.
That did happen. That's real.
Of course, I was there. I was hosting it. No, so was it a slow burn, like as far as growth of an audience for you guys, or was there certain moments where maybe a guest happened or an article was written, or what was?
There were a few moments like that. So it was a slow burn at first, and then we had a very nice Atlantic article written by this guy Kevin O'Keefe, who wrote like an effusive thing about how great it was to see guys talking non-ironically about women's entertainment.
Right.
And then there was a boon after that, and then I don't remember. There was like a period where Gilmore Girls was more popular because it was back on Netflix, which is also the reason we started the podcast.
Right.
But then there was a boom because of that. And then we got lucky enough where we had Scott Patterson, who was one of the main actors of Gilmore Girls on the show. And there was a boon because of that, but also because he started saying there are talks of bringing the show back.
Right.
And there was a huge boon.
Huge timing, yeah.
And so at that point we were doing live shows, and they did a Gilmore Girls Fan Fest, which we were invited to, and there was another boon because of that, and because it was clear that at that point the cast all knew about us, and like Amy Sherman Palladino had talked about us, and so people were like, who are these guys? And like it just really blew up to a point where we were in like the 5th season, and we were just like a massive podcast, and it was it was very unpredictable, but also great.
Well, I think one thing that I messed up with starting my podcast, because I definitely haven't blown up at all, definitely not as much as you guys. I think a lot of it has to do with what you said, just like the fucking around. I think a lot of people like to tune in for a rapport between two people.
All of my favorite podcasts, you're listening because at first you're listening because you like a guest, but then you're listening because you really like the comfort of the rapport. Yeah.
And that's like my problem. I get spikes from certain guests, but nobody's coming back from the rapport I have with
yourself.
Somebody they don't. Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's got to be part of it too, where people come in, as you said, for a guest, and then they're like, oh, these two though are great without the guest, so let's just focus on that.
Is nice, because by the time we had ended Gilmore Girls, there were people who were like, I disagree with a lot of what you said about Gilmore Girls, but I still listen because I love you guys, and I would love to listen to you guys talk about anything. So we're like, that's so cool. Well, let's do Bunheads.
Right.
And then we decided to do Bunheads.
Let me play devil's advocate quick. Do you think you guys would have had as much success if Gilmore Girls didn't come back?
I think it would have still been successful, but not as successful, because I think we were successful before it was coming back. And I think when he said there are talks, there weren't actually any talks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which we found out.
So maybe you're the reason it came back.
A lot of people say that, but there's part of me that's like, I don't want to believe that at all, because a lot of people don't like the version that came back, and so if I'm responsible for that, I want to be like, not me.
Right.
But I think it's just like, it was destined to come back because of something.
Right.
Like, everyone involved still loved it, and like when it came back on Netflix, there was a huge surge of people who were like, the audience is still there. So I think we were just another like thing in their list of reasons this show could come back.
Right.
So yeah,
it was almost like you guys worked out good for each other.
Exactly. It was a very mutual relationship, and I do think that we wouldn't have been as popular if the show hadn't come back, but I like to believe that our rapport would have worked to make us sort of affable to a larger audience anyway. So
yeah. I remember my mom, she watched Gilmore Girls start to finish. It was like the only show she's like committed to.
Oh, yeah?
And I asked her, at one point in the middle of your run, I was like, did you know there's a podcast about this? And she knew about you guys, and she's tapped in, but not really tapped in. And when she knew you guys, I was like, damn, these guys are doing it then. If my mom knows about it.
One of the craziest things that used to happen regularly when we did live shows is we would have like mothers and daughters in the audience.
Yeah.
And when it was like, we'd wait around to meet people and say hi to whoever wanted to wait after the show, we'd meet a mother and daughter audience and start being like, oh, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for dragging your mom here. And it'd be like, actually, my mom dragged me. And we'd be like, what? That's cool. That's so cool. Moms are listening to us.
That's pretty exciting.
It's so exciting that it's like,
because as a young boy, you always are, the moms are always against you. Watch out for that young boy.
Right.
And now you've flipped the script where the moms love you.
But it was like, when we started the podcast, we never wanted the joke to be like, it's guys on women. It was just like, this is just a thing that, Kevin thinks is cool and I'm open to. Let's talk about it. And so to have people, approach us afterwards and have it be like people way outside of a demographic you'd think for two like young 20s guys doing anything, it's just this sort of like, it feels very like heartwarming and cool to know that it's like, you can do anything you want for any kind of person. If you're willing to like treat a subject matter with respect, then you don't have to, you don't have to pretend like, because we're guys, we can only do a show about Rambo or whatever.
Right.
But it's always sweet.
Yeah, that's great.
I love it.